I never thought a fence could cause so much chaos in my life, but looking back, it was the start of the most satisfying revenge I have ever pulled off. My name is Daniel, and I've always been the kind of man who works with his hands, speaks straight, and minds his own business. About 3 years ago, I finally bought the property I'd been dreaming of for years, a 40-acre ranch just outside of town. It was a beautiful place, full of rolling pastures, a little creek that cut through the back, and enough space for my horses to run free. After years of saving, working double shifts, and fixing up other people's fences and barns, I finally had my own spread. The first thing I wanted to do after moving in was put up a fence that really stood out, something unique, something that felt like me. I wasn't about to put up some plain wire or boring wooden posts like everyone else around here. So, I spent weeks designing a colorful, Western-style fence, complete with painted panels, metal art pieces welded into the gates, and some old wagon wheels I'd restored and mounted between the posts. It was bright, bold, and honestly pretty damn beautiful, the kind of thing that turned heads when people drove by. At first, a lot of folks who passed by would slow down, smile, and even stop to compliment it. I had ranchers from 2 counties over asking me about the paint I used and the design. It felt good to finally have something of my own that reflected my personality, but of course, not everyone saw it that way. Within a week of finishing the fence, I started getting little notes on my gate. At first, they were polite. This fence doesn't meet HOA standards. Please repaint the panels to an approved neutral color. Remove decorations not approved by the board. At first, I laughed, because I didn't even know we had an HOA. My property was on the edge of town, a good distance from a neat little suburban development that had popped up about 10 years ago. I figured they had their own rules over there, but I didn't think they applied to me. My ranch wasn't even part of their neighborhood. I bought it from an old rancher who told me the land had been free from HOA interference since before the development was built. I ignored the first few notes, thinking they were some kind of mistake. But then, one morning, I walked outside to find 3 people standing at my gate, clipboards in hand, sunglasses on, looking like they were about to serve me court papers. They introduced themselves as the HOA board, and the president, a woman named Karen, who looked like she'd been practicing her scowl in the mirror, told me flat out that my fence violated their community aesthetic guidelines, and had to be removed or repainted within 30 days. I tried to be polite at first. I told them that my property wasn't even listed under their HOA and that my deed had no mention of it. But Karen wasn't having it. She said that even though my ranch wasn't originally part of the HOA, they had recently expanded their jurisdiction to include the road leading to my property, which, according to her, gave them authority over my land as well. I laughed in her face. You can't just decide you own my land because you drew a bigger circle on a map, I told her. That was the beginning of the war. Over the next month, I started getting official-looking letters in the mail, each one more aggressive than the last. Fines started showing up on my mailbox, $100 a day, $200 a day, all because I refused to take down my fence. Then came the threats. They said they would file a lien on my property. They said they would take me to court. They even blocked the road one day, parking their golf carts across it so I couldn't get my truck out. That was the day I knew I wasn't just dealing with some overzealous neighborhood committee, I was dealing with bullies. And if there's one thing I don't do, it's roll over for bullies. I started documenting everything, taking pictures of the notes, the fines, the blocked road, even recording conversations with them. I knew enough to cover my bases legally. I went down to the county clerk's office and double-checked my deed. Sure enough, my property wasn't under their HOA. The road leading to my ranch was technically a private easement that the HOA maintained, but it wasn't owned by them. It was owned by the original developer, who, as it turned out, had been trying to sell off unused parcels of land, including that road, for years. That little detail planted a seed in my mind that would grow into the most perfect revenge plan I'd ever come up with. But I didn't act right away. First, I had to put up with a few more weeks of harassment. They started showing up unannounced, taking pictures of my property. Once, I caught one of them on my land, measuring the height of my fence. I called the sheriff on them for trespassing, but the deputy who showed up just gave me a shrug and said, "You know how these HOA folks are." Apparently, he'd dealt with them before, and I could tell from his tone he wasn't a fan either. The final straw came when I was leaving for work one morning and found that they'd chained the gates shut from the outside, locking me in. That was it. I was done playing nice. That same afternoon, I called up the developer listed on the easement records and made him an offer for the road. He was more than happy to get rid of it. He said the HOA had been a nightmare to deal with for years, constantly demanding free maintenance and threatening lawsuits over potholes. Within a month, the sale was finalized. For a surprisingly reasonable price, I became the proud owner of the only road leading into their neighborhood, and to my ranch. The moment I signed those papers, I knew the tables had turned. I had no intention of being cruel right away. I sent them a formal notice stating that, as the new owner of the road, I expected them to stop harassing me and to rescind all fines and letters sent regarding my fence. I told them that if they wanted to continue using the road, we could work out a fair maintenance agreement, but that my property was off limits for any HOA enforcement. Predictably, Karen and her board sent back a smug letter telling me that I had no authority over them and that they would continue their enforcement actions. That was the last mistake they made before I decided to close the road. The morning I decided to close the road, I woke up with a sense of satisfaction that I hadn't felt in months. The papers transferring ownership of the road had been sitting in my safe for over a week, and I figured I'd given them enough time to come to their senses. Since they had ignored my letter, it was time to teach them a lesson they would never forget. I had spent the last few days getting everything ready: fresh, private property, no trespassing, signs, heavy-duty steel gates, and a set of surveillance cameras to monitor everything. I hired a local contractor friend to help me install the gates across the main road, just past the point where it met the county highway. I made sure the gates were solid, reinforced steel, padlocked with industrial locks, and set in concrete posts deep enough that no pickup truck was going to pull them down easily. By the time the sun went down that evening, the only road leading to my ranch and the HOA's neighborhood was officially closed to anyone who didn't have my permission to use it. I'll never forget the first morning they discovered it. I was sitting on my porch with a cup of coffee when I saw a line of cars backing up near the gate. At first, people were just confused. Some of the early commuters got out of their cars, walked up to the gate, and started reading the signs. I'd put it in plain English: private road, access restricted. Trespassers will be prosecuted. You'd think that would be clear enough, but soon the honking started. Then the yelling. By the time the HOA board members arrived, the place looked like a traffic jam on a highway. Karen stormed up to the gate, red-faced and shouting about how I couldn't do this. I didn't even bother going down there that first morning. I just watched from a distance, sipping my coffee, letting them stew in their own panic. Within an hour, my phone started blowing up. First, it was Karen, then the HOA vice president, then random neighbors I didn't even know. The voicemails were incredible: threats, demands, even some begging. They all had the same tone, though: absolute shock that someone had dared to stand up to them. I didn't answer a single one. Instead, I had my lawyer draft a letter explaining that as the lawful owner of the road, I was within my rights to restrict access. If they wanted access restored, they could sign a road maintenance agreement, drop all fines and enforcement actions against me, and pay a yearly fee for the use of my road. I had the letter hand-delivered to the HOA office by courier that same afternoon. That's when things really got fun. The next few days were absolute chaos. People were forced to park their cars on the shoulder of the highway and walk almost half a mile just to get to their houses. Delivery trucks couldn't get in. Garbage pickup was cancelled. School buses refused to enter because they didn't have permission. I saw grown adults dragging groceries in wagons down the road like they were living in the 1800s. I knew it was petty, I knew it was causing them pain, but after the months of harassment I'd endured, it felt like justice. The HOA board called an emergency meeting, which I watched from a distance. They held it right near the gate so people could yell at me across the fence. They threatened to sue me, threatened to call the sheriff, threatened to take back the road. But every time they made a threat, my lawyer calmly reminded them that I was operating completely within my rights. Then came the day Karen herself showed up at my front gate. She was fuming, her face practically purple with rage. She banged on my gate until I finally walked out to meet her. "You can't do this," she screamed. "Oh, I can," I told her, calm as ever. "And I am. This is illegal. You're holding the whole community hostage." "Then maybe you shouldn't have messed with the wrong guy," I said, leaning against the gate. "You had your chance. All I wanted was to be left alone. But you decided to come after me, find me, block me in, and threaten me. So now, you live with the consequences." She tried to threaten me again, talking about lawsuits and police action, but I just pointed at the cameras I had set up. "Everything you say is being recorded, Karen. So maybe be careful with your threats." She stomped off in a rage, and I knew that wouldn't be the last of it. Sure enough, the next day, a sheriff's deputy showed up at my property. He was a tall guy, broad-shouldered, and had that tired look of someone who'd been called into too many HOA disputes in his career. He asked if I could come talk to him at the gate. When I got there, he explained that the HOA had filed a complaint, claiming I was unlawfully blocking their access. I showed him my deed, the purchase documents for the road, and the legal letter my attorney had prepared. The deputy looked it all over, nodded, and said, "Well, looks like you're in the clear. I can't force you to open it." Then he added with a smirk, "Not gonna lie, I wish more people would do this to HOAs. They're a pain in my ass." That was the moment I knew I had won the first major battle. The HOA couldn't touch me legally, and now they had no way to pressure me without giving in to my demands. Still, they tried every dirty trick they could think of. One night, someone tried to cut the lock on the gate, but I had a motion-activated camera installed, and the footage was crystal clear. I handed it over to the sheriff, and they ended up pressing charges against the guy, one of Karen's close friends on the board. That sent a message to the rest of them, I wasn't playing games. After about 2 weeks, the HOA caved. They sent me a letter agreeing to my terms, they rescinded all fines, promised in writing never to enforce any HOA rules on my property again, and agreed to pay me a yearly maintenance fee for the road. Only then did I give them access again, and even then, I kept the gate and cameras in place. I wasn't about to let them forget who owned the road now. But the story doesn't end there, because as soon as the road was open, I realized just how much power I held. And I started thinking about how I could use it to make my life, and the lives of every other person the HOA had harassed, a whole lot easier. Owning that road gave me a taste of something I didn't know I had been missing, control. For months I had been the one under attack, waking up every day wondering what new fine or letter I'd find on my gate. But now, every time I drove past that gate with my key in the lock and saw the HOA's little security cameras pointed uselessly at me, I felt a surge of satisfaction. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, they were the ones scrambling, they were the ones trying to appease me. And I wasn't going to let them off the hook that easily. The first thing I did after reopening the road was put up a brand new, custom-made sign right next to the gate. It read, in big bold letters, "This road is privately owned and maintained by Daniel Miller. Trespassers will be prosecuted." I added a smaller sign underneath that said, "All users must comply with posted rules." That second sign was the part that really made them squirm. Because now, every single resident in that HOA had to follow my rules, not the other way around. And my rules were simple: respect my property, keep your board members off my land, and don't complain about my fence again. Within a week, I started getting requests from other residents, not the board members, but regular homeowners, asking if they could work out side agreements with me to stop the HOA from harassing them. Apparently, I wasn't the only one they'd been targeting. One guy, an older retired vet named Carl, told me they'd fined him for parking his RV in his own driveway. Another family had been written up for having Christmas lights up past January. People were sick of it, and once they realized I held the power to make the HOA's life miserable, they started seeing me less like the enemy and more like a folk hero. That's when I got the idea to start hosting meetings at my ranch. I invited the frustrated residents over one Saturday afternoon, lit up my smoker, and cooked enough ribs and brisket for 20 people. What started as a casual gathering turned into a full-blown anti-HOA rally. People were venting, sharing their stories, and asking if there was any legal way to disband the HOA completely. I wasn't a lawyer, but I knew enough about property rights by now to know it wasn't easy. Still, I promised them I'd look into it, and I meant it. Meanwhile, Karen and her board were losing their grip. The road closure had broken their sense of authority, and now they had to pay me every year just to function. Their little empire wasn't as untouchable as they'd thought. I decided to turn up the pressure just a little more. Since I was now responsible for maintaining the road, I posted a speed limit of 10 miles per hour, and hired a local security company to monitor compliance. I wasn't trying to be petty, but I did enjoy the thought of Karen having to crawl down that road at a snail's pace every time she left her house. And yes, I might have placed the speed bumps a little closer together than strictly necessary. The more power I had, the more confident I became. My fence? I made it bigger, bolder, and brighter. I added more painted panels, some metal art shaped like running horses, even a custom wooden sign with my ranch's name carved into it. People driving by stopped to take pictures. It became a landmark. Every time I saw it shining in the sun, I felt like it was a personal victory. The HOA could no longer touch me, and my fence was staying exactly the way I wanted it. But my fight wasn't just about me anymore. It was about standing up to a system that thought it could control every little detail of people's lives. So I started digging deeper into the HOA's finances and bylaws. Public records showed they were mismanaging funds, spending thousands on things like decorative landscaping while ignoring basic maintenance. One look at their books and I realized they were running at a deficit. My yearly road fee wasn't just a nuisance to them, it was crippling their budget. I decided to twist the knife. I sent them an updated contract that included a late fee for any missed payments, plus an annual percentage increase to cover inflation and wear and tear costs. They had no choice but to sign, because without access to the road, their property values would plummet overnight. By now, the regular homeowners were openly complaining about the board. At one point, I drove through the neighborhood and saw a "Recall the HOA board" sign stuck in someone's yard. A few weeks later, I heard through the grapevine that Karen had called an emergency vote to step down from her position. The pressure had finally gotten to her. She was gone, just like that. A new, more reasonable board was elected, and the first thing they did was call me to set up a meeting. When they came out to the ranch, they weren't angry or defensive. They were respectful, even apologetic. They admitted the previous board had overstepped and asked if we could work together moving forward. I agreed, but on my terms. I had them put it in writing that my ranch would never be subject to HOA rules or fines, no matter what. I had them agree to fund half the cost of future maintenance projects on the road. And I had them issue a formal apology for the harassment I'd endured, not just to me, but posted publicly on their community bulletin. When the letter went out, it felt like vindication. I wasn't just free of their nonsense, I had made them admit they were wrong in front of the whole neighborhood. From that day forward, things changed. The new board left me alone completely, and the residents who had once glared at me when I put up my colorful fence now waved when I drove by. The road was kept in perfect condition, the speed limits were respected, and not a single complaint crossed my mailbox again. For the first time since I'd moved to the ranch, I could just enjoy my land in peace. But even as things settled down, I couldn't help but smile every time I unlocked that gate. It was more than just a road now. It was a reminder that when someone pushes you too far, you don't have to just take it. You can push back, and sometimes, you can win. After the dust settled and Karen's reign of terror was officially over, I felt like I could finally breathe again. The constant stress that had hung over me for months just disappeared. It's funny, I'd always thought of myself as a tough guy, someone who could take whatever life threw at him, but I didn't realize how much the HOA's harassment had worn me down until it stopped. For the first time since I'd moved in, my mornings were peaceful again. I could sit on the porch with a cup of coffee and just watch the sunrise over the hills without wondering if today was the day I'd find another threat in my mailbox. That freedom meant more to me than I could explain, and it reminded me why I had fought so hard in the first place. But I wasn't just going to let things go back to the way they were before. I wanted to make sure nothing like this ever happened to me, or anyone else, again. The whole ordeal had opened my eyes to just how much power HOAs could have over people, and how easily that power could be abused. So I started doing more than just protecting my own property. I began helping some of the other residents who had come to me during the road closure. Carl, the retired vet, was one of the first. He told me the HOA had slapped him with thousands in fines over the years for ridiculous things, weeds growing near the fence line, his grandkids' toys left in the yard, even a flagpole he'd put up to fly the American flag. I put him in touch with my lawyer, and together we managed to get a lot of those fines wiped out. Seeing the relief on his face when he got that letter of dismissal was almost as satisfying as putting up my first private road sign. Soon, word got around that I was the guy to talk to if you were having trouble with the HOA. I didn't mind, in fact, I liked it. For years, I'd been the guy who just minded his own business, stayed quiet, and did his work. But now, I had a voice. People respected me, not just because I owned the road, but because I'd stood up for myself, and for them. The gatherings at my ranch started happening more regularly, and before long, they weren't just about complaints. We started talking about ways to make the whole community better, without the overreach and control the old board had enforced. I found myself stepping into a leadership role I never expected. It was strange at first, but it felt good. I started organizing road maintenance days where volunteers could help out, saving everyone money and giving us all a sense of pride in where we lived. We planted wildflowers along the ditches, built a little picnic area near the creek, and even set up a community bulletin board near the gate for people to post events or share news. For the first time, the road wasn't just a source of conflict, it became a meeting place, a sign of cooperation. Meanwhile, I kept improving my ranch. I built a bigger barn, expanded my horse pastures, and even started offering riding lessons to kids in the neighborhood. It wasn't about making money, though the extra cash was nice, it was about sharing the land and building connections. I realized that as angry as I had been at the HOA, I didn't hate the people who lived under it. Most of them were just like me, hardworking folks who wanted a nice place to live. It was the system that had been broken, not the community itself. That said, I never let go of my leverage completely. The gate stayed locked at night, and I kept the cameras running. I didn't flaunt my ownership of the road, but I also didn't let anyone forget who held the keys. Every time the new board came up for re-election, I reminded them, politely, that I expected the same respect and autonomy going forward. They always agreed. They knew better than to test me. There were moments when I thought about what would have happened if I hadn't fought back, if I'd just caved and painted my fence beige like they wanted. My life would have been miserable. I would have spent every day wondering what new rule I might accidentally break, what little piece of my freedom I'd have to give up next. That thought alone kept me determined to never give in again. My fence stood as bright and bold as the day I'd painted it, a reminder that sometimes you have to make a stand, even over something as simple as a fence. The best part of all of this was seeing the change in the neighborhood's atmosphere. People smiled more, waved more. There was less gossip, less finger-pointing. Instead of nitpicking each other's lawns, folks were helping each other with projects. We organized cookouts, trail rides, even holiday celebrations. It felt like we'd gone back to a simpler time, when neighbors actually knew and cared about each other. Even the new HOA board got on board with the idea. They started rewriting some of the old rules, making them less strict and more reasonable. They eliminated the silly fines for minor things, stopped hassling people over paint colors, and focused on real issues like safety and infrastructure. By the time spring rolled around, the place felt less like a dictatorship and more like an actual community. And I'd be lying if I said I didn't take a little pride in knowing I had sparked that change. It started with one fence, one act of defiance, and grew into something that made life better for dozens of families. Sometimes, I'd sit on my porch in the evenings, watching the sun dip behind the hills, and think about how close I'd come to selling this place when things were at their worst. Now, I couldn't imagine living anywhere else. It's been over a year since I closed that road for the first time, and sometimes I still laugh when I think about the look on Karen's face that morning. That moment, standing on my porch, coffee in hand, watching the chaos unfold down by the gate, was the first time I truly felt like I was in control of my own destiny. Before that, I'd spent months feeling trapped, cornered, and powerless, even though I owned 40 acres of land. There's nothing worse than feeling like a prisoner on your own property, like you can't even live your life without someone breathing down your neck. And now, thanks to a little research, a little stubbornness, and a whole lot of grit, I'd turned the tables so completely that the people who once tried to control me were now forced to ask my permission just to drive home at night. Looking back, I realized that what I did wasn't just about revenge, though I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel good to watch the HOA squirm for a while. It was about setting boundaries. About standing up for myself in a way that said, loud and clear, I won't be bullied. Life has a way of testing you sometimes, of putting you in situations where you have to decide who you are and what you're willing to put up with. This was one of those moments for me. And in the end, I didn't just protect my own freedom, I ended up creating a stronger, freer community for everyone around me. Owning the road has become more than just a legal right, it's a responsibility I take seriously. I make sure it's always well maintained, graded when it needs it, cleared of debris after storms. I've even added solar lights along the edges so it's safer at night. People notice those things, and they appreciate them. These days, instead of getting angry phone calls or threatening letters, I get thank you notes. Sometimes folks stop me when I'm working on the fence line just to shake my hand and tell me how much better things are now. I never expected to be the kind of person who played such a big role in a neighborhood, but here I am, the man who bought the road and changed everything. And it hasn't just been about the road. My ranch has flourished in ways I never imagined. The horse riding lessons turned into a little weekend business. I host barbecues and trail rides that bring people together. Families who never spoke to each other before now sit around my fire pit swapping stories. I see kids running through the fields, laughing, playing, making memories, and I think, this is what a neighborhood is supposed to feel like. Not a place where you're afraid of breaking some made-up rule, but a place where you feel welcome, safe, and free. There's a certain peace that comes with knowing you've stood your ground and won. Every time I walk out to my gate and see my colorful fence shining in the sun, I feel that peace settle over me. That fence is more than wood and paint, it's a symbol. A symbol of the day I said enough was enough. A symbol of the moment I took back my freedom. People still stop to admire it when they drive by, and every time they do, I smile and wave. If anything, I've made it even more colorful over time. Some folks say it looks gaudy, I say it looks like victory. As for Karen, I hear she moved out not long after she stepped down as HOA president. I can't say I was surprised. From what I gather, she couldn't stand seeing me every day, knowing she'd lost. The funny thing is, I don't even hold a grudge against her anymore. She was just doing what she thought was right, in her own overbearing, self-righteous way. And in a strange way, I almost feel grateful to her. If it hadn't been for her pushing me, I might never have discovered just how strong I could be. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that you can't let fear run your life. You can't let other people decide what you can and can't do just because they say so. Freedom is worth fighting for, even when the fight is messy, even when it costs you time, money, and sleepless nights. Because at the end of the day, being able to look around and know you didn't back down, that you stood your ground and claimed your place in the world, that feeling is priceless. Sometimes, when the evening is quiet and the stars are out, I'll take a slow walk down the road I now own. I'll run my hand along the smooth steel of the gate, check the locks, and just stand there for a while, listening to the sounds of the night. Out there, with the crickets chirping and the wind rustling the grass, I feel like the king of my own little kingdom. Not because I have power over anyone, but because I have peace. Because I know that no matter what happens next, I'll never let anyone take that freedom from me again. This land, this road, this life, I fought for it. And I won.